Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate you dropping by. Hope you'll come back often. Hope you tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I want to turn to Father Ron Walters for the show's prayer. Father Walters.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father. We really appreciate all of your participation and your help with the shows. Now I'd like to show a video of our sponsor for the show, who is Dennis Brennan, who owns Brennan's Model Railroaders.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Swanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
Dennis, thank you so very much for being the sponsor for our show. We really do appreciate it. Can't thank you enough for having the confidence in us to do it. I want to talk about our scholarship program. As you know, I've talked about before, we have a challenge grant. One of the viewers of our show who wants to remain anonymous has pledged $1,000 that he will match small donations up to $80, all the way up to $1,000. So we hope that we can get the donations up to $1,000 with small donations. It's on our website. I think we have a QR code slide that we can use, Phil. If you'll go to our website, here it is. We use Zeffy. 100% of every donation that goes through Zeffy goes directly into our scholarship fund. They don't take a single penny. They provide all the documentation back to the donor for their federal tax return deduction. And without Zeffy, I don't know what we do. But Zeffy is really a boon for 501c3s like us, because it doesn't cost us anything, and 100% of all of your donations to the scholarship go directly into the scholarship fund. So we need to raise $1,000. We've raised around $300 so far, so we've got a long way to go, and we have until the end of December to raise this $1,000. So if you see your way clear at all to contribute something, it doesn't have to be $80, it can be any amount. We certainly would appreciate it, because we do want to try to raise the $1,000 matching grant so that we have the $1,000 challenge grant that we can add to the funding. And we thank the donor for their contribution. We're also starting a new publication. Martin Breckbild, who's the current editor of a model railroad publication, O-Scale Trains, has agreed to be the editor of it. So I know it'll be a first-class publication. And we're trying to work out all of the bugs and so forth about how we get it on the website and how we notify the YouTube subscribers that it's available to them, how they log into it and so forth. But the easiest way to get it is to be a subscriber on our website. Every subscriber on our website, we have an email for you, and you will receive an email of this publication. The first one will go out around the 1st of December. It'll be a monthly publication. And what we're trying to do is say, this is what has been doing. This is what we're going to be doing. And this is some news that we think that you might be interested in that you may not have seen before. And that'll be the kind of a newsletter it is. It'll be written 100% by the viewers and the participants of New Tracks. So if you have something that you think would be of value that you'd like to share with all the rest of us, send it to Martin Breckbild. If you have some comments about the show that you'd like to share with us, send it to Martin Breckbild. And we'll get a newsletter put out. And hopefully everybody will gain a little bit more information about the show and what we're trying to accomplish and what we are accomplishing, where the scholarship is, the kind of specific help that we need at that particular time. And we think that it'll be an advantage for everybody to get out that kind of information. So the first one will be out 1st of December, or about then. And can't thank Martin enough for wanting to do this. And for everybody else that's volunteering to be a piece of it, to make sure that we actually get it published, that it's on the website, that it's available to the people on YouTube. But as I say, the easiest way to make sure you get a copy is to be a subscriber to our website. And our website is newtracksmodeling.com. Well, with that said, I'd like to go to Chris Course for the My Bill. The next one coming up is next week. And that's an important one. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I just lost my slider real quick here. Let me go find it for you. All right, now go to the, it's not allowing me to share screen.
Pat, can you help him share his screen?
It should be okay. Try it again.
Yeah, it
Chris.
says you cannot start screen share with while the other participant is sharing.
Try it now.
Okay, all right, we'll give it a shot now. There we go. All right, much better. Sorry about that. All right, next week, November 22nd, the My Build is featuring you. This one is a free-for-all. Please email me your photos to railrunner130@hotmail.com. I'd like to get them by November 20th if possible. Please include as much information as you can in there. And also, if you've never participated before, big hint, if you haven't participated before, please send us slides and include a photo of yourself at the same time so we can put that on your title card. And let's see. The other My Build that we want to talk about tonight is December 20th, and that has a holiday theme. Whatever you can do to fit in that, fit in the holiday theme bracket. Santa, Christmas, billboard, cars, snow scenery, snow plows, people ice skating, holiday lighting, holiday decorations, those sorts of things, all fit into this category. And I'm sure I know there's things that I'm not thinking about that somebody's going to bring up and I'll be like, oh, cool, I didn't think about that. So anyway, please share that stuff with us. And that one is December 20th. So you've got plenty of time. If you've got your slides ready now, go ahead and send them to me and I'll mark them for December. So again, my email address is railrunner130@hotmail.com. And please send us your photos so we can highlight what you've been working on. maybe not something you've been working on. Maybe it's something you found at a garage sale or something you thought was really cool, or pretty much anything that fits in this category. Because we'd love to know what you guys are thinking and looking at. So anyway, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate everything that you do to help us with this My Bill. And guys, keep in mind, come the 1st of January, Chris and I are going to try to make this a whole show each month. But again, that depends on your participation and your interest. If you want us to see what you're showing, then let Chris know and we'll get you scheduled in. If we don't have enough people for it to be a full show, then we'll keep doing it like we're doing it now and fill in with other segments. But we think that we're getting enough people that are interested and enough new people that we ought to consider at least increasing the time that we allocate for people just to show and talk about what they're building. So that's what the plan is. Well, now let me start the show for tonight. The first segment is sponsored by O-Scale Central Association. The president is David Vaughn, and I have a short video that I want to play about the association. So Pat, if we could play the video, please.
I'm David Vaughn of O-Scale Central. O-Scale 2-rail, models built to 1:48 scale and running on 2-rail track, is the best-kept secret in model railroading. We're pleased to team with Jim Kello to introduce O-Scale 2-rail to New Tracks viewers. O-Scale 2-rail is for modelers. At twice the scale and 8 times the mass of HO, O-Scale's heft and ease of modeling create an outstanding model railroading experience. O-Scale 2-rail modeling is as varied as railroading itself. Modern era, transition or old time, standard gauge or narrow. A wide variety of models is available at affordable prices. There is a supportive community and lots of shows, clubs, and events. You can explore O-Scale 2-rail by going to our website, oscalecentral.com. You will find information about the scale and how to get started, as well as a free, searchable, scale-wide product and service guide and listings of coming O-Scale events. You will also find information about how to join O-Scale Central. We promote O-Scale 2-rail and support modelers in the scale. When your eyes are going bifocular, when you need fresh challenges, keep O-Scale 2-rail in mind. Check us out, oscalecentral.com. Thanks.
Well, now for the O-Scale modeling segment tonight, our host is David Schultz. David, you may know, is a long-time O-Scale modeler, and I'm really happy that he agreed to do this. David, thank you so much.
See here. All right, we're doing this by iPad. So we're going to be struggling a little bit with the technology because I'm not a tech guy. Anyway, I thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. I sometimes feel I was standing in a line of O-scalers and they said, who wants to volunteer to do this? And everybody around me took one step back. So that's how I look around at some of the people that are on this show. And it's like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm qualified to speak about quality of modeling, but here we go. Anyway, I thought for the first show, I've got some subjects I'll be bringing up in future shows, but I thought tonight I'd just start with a little bit of an introduction to myself and then a little explanation about what O-Scale is all about. So anyway, I unlike a lot of people, I didn't exactly start off modeling trains. I built truck models at a very young age. My father owned a trucking company, and of course, I'd run to the local hobby shop at about 9 years old, and I'd buy AMT truck models. They were about $5, I think, back then. And the other day I was in the store, and I think they're around $40 some now. So I would build these truck models, and I was always fascinated with the amount of detail. In fact, I used to show my father the engine in every truck model, and he could tell me what engine it was because of the detail. Well, my grandfather worked for the railroad, and I was fascinated with trains. And of course, I got a Lionel train set for Christmas. And I was fascinated with that too, but the level of detail just wasn't anything that I was interested in. But I still played with the Lionel trains for years and get the catalogs and look through it and add to it. Well, probably, I want to say late 70s, I was invited to a model railroad flea market, and I'd never heard of such a thing. I'd been to other flea markets as such, but never one specifically for model railroading. And I went up to Fargo, North Dakota, because I live in Duluth now. But anyway, went to Fargo to this train show, and there was probably 20 tables at this show, which is very minute compared to the shows around. But that is the most Lionel I had ever seen in my life, and most model trains I'd ever seen in my life. 20 tables, good heavens. So I looked around, and there was a guy there who had Lionel trains, but he had modified them to O scale. And I thought, well, this is absolutely fantastic, because he's actually adding detail, kind of like my truck models. And these run. So, God, it's the best of both worlds, because my truck models would just sit on a shelf and collect dust. So I got to talking to him, and I went back home, and I decided the Lionel wasn't as bad as what I originally thought. But later on, I ended up going to an O-scale show down in the cities, and that one actually had probably 50 or 60 tables to it, and it was strictly O-scale. And that was the end of the Lionel. When I was comparing my Lionel stuff to what the O-scale community had, and I think the biggest difference was probably the Lionel caboose. I put that up against an Atlas bay window, or not a bay window, a wide vision caboose, and I don't know where Lionel came from, thinking that was kind of O-scale, because that O-scale Atlas caboose just dwarfed that Lionel caboose. So went home and decided to sell it all off. Well, in the meantime, I started buying O-scale stuff, and of course kits, and the railroad started calling, and I decided to go work for the railroad. So for the next 30 years, of course, I worked for the Wisconsin Central, and then eventually the Canadian National, and they bought it out. I spent 30 years on the railroad. So there wasn't a lot of modeling going on there between the railroad and raising a family and buying houses and just life in general. There wasn't a lot of O-scale, but I fitted in. I learned to carry a briefcase with me to work. I would bring tools with me. I'd bring glues and stuff. I'd sit in the hotel room and build what I could out of a briefcase. And so anyway, that's kind of my background. I retired here 2 years ago. And so now I'm really kicking it into high gear. But anyway, a little history on the O-scale thing. And I'm not an expert on this, so somebody can correct me if I'm way off mark. But O-scale started probably with Lionel or something in that fashion. And of course, they used the same kind of track that was used over in Britain, which comes out to be about 5 foot in American. And of course, that transferred over to O-scale because they started importing track out of Britain, who of course was using the metric system. And theirs is, it scales out in English to 1/43. So the American manufacturers, decided that, okay, well, we'll just use that 5 foot track because we can import that, and we'll have to make the trucks a little bit wider to accommodate the wider track. But I don't know if they thought nobody's going to care and nobody's going to notice. So anyway, Lionel, of course, used it on their track. I know that, some of my earliest recollections of O-scale are Atlas. Of course, all their stuff came running on 5 foot track, probably because it was made in Austria. And I'm not sure exactly when it started, but somebody decided, well, let's go to 17/64ths, because then the models will scale up and they will actually fit the track that'll be close to the 4 foot 8.5 that actual railroads are. And I know that Carl Owl did it, and he was manufacturing this stuff back in World War II. But the 17/64th movement apparently required a little too much math, and it kind of failed. But it must have infected some people, because they decided, no, instead of scaling the models up, let's bring the track within. So they moved the track into the proper 4 foot 8.5, and originally, I believe, called it Q scale. And the Q scale thing was kind of the starting point. And somewhere in the history, it switched to the Proto 48. and it started gaining speed. Now, when I got involved in Proto 48, I had bought a small lathe, and there was an article, I don't remember the magazine, but it talked about the proper wheel profile. So I grabbed my lathe and a bar of round stock mild steel, and I started turning wheels for my LSF units. And I was so impressed with how much better the locomotives looked with that I had made the switch over to Proto 48. But that's for another show. I'll talk about that. Anyway, back to the model truck thing. I love the amount of detail that was in those trucks, and I decided that this is what I'm going to do in O scale. I'm not going to build a empire in as much as I'm going to take a single car and I will add all the detail that I can to this model. And that's what really got me interested. And then when you're done building it, you set it on the track and off it goes. So I'll see if I can share this thing. This ought to be interesting. I do have some pictures of some of the models I've built, and we'll start with those two and see if, there we go. That is an RPO that I built, and actually a Northern Pacific car. RPO, and then the other half, that the RPO section is 30 foot. The rest of the 60 foot streamlined car is dormitory, and the NP actually had these cars. Well, anyway, I built the overhead sorting bins. I built the pigeonholes you see on the end there, and the tables. The mail sacks are constructed. The floor is just wood planking. And this is the kind of thing that I really enjoy, is to make that look like an actual car. And then this is another car that I built that is roomettes. It's got its little folding hopper in the chair, and it was meant for single passengers, business people traveling from one city to the next, so they could sit in the room by themselves. It wasn't really meant for a family. So anyway, that's some of the models that I've built. Using talking about the level of detail. And of course, I find that in O scale, it's so much easier. I have seen impressive HO models built with this kind of level of detail, but if I don't bring my jeweler's loop with me, I really can't enjoy it. So I enjoy the O scale so much better. Let's see what else I got on here. Okay, well, we'll switch to the I never thought when I had decided to go to O scale over the Lionel, I would never own a piece of Lionel ever again. And then lo and behold, good old Lionel comes out with scale cars. And when I originally saw this car, I thought, that is a ridiculous paint job on there. This is back when I didn't know as much about the NP as I do now. I thought that's a ridiculous paint job, but I can always take it home and repaint the car. Well, I got it home and got out my book on Northern Pacific, and lo and behold, not only was the lettering absolutely correct on this car, but they used the same number. So I trust they used that photograph to make this car. Now, I've still got the Lionel trucks on there and the Lionel couplers, but Lionel also made it very easy to convert that car. So I will, in the future here, convert that devil and make it more O scale. I'm trying to think of, let's see, I'm trying to think what else I was going to talk about here. Like I say, this is kind of my first one. I've got other shows planned here in the future. Let's see here. I guess that's going to be about it. I've talked about what brought me into the scale. The other thing I guess I can bring up is I know that a lot of people think that O scale is really expensive, and granted, some of it is, but a lot of times if you go to shows, the shows are a good place to find cheaper and sometimes broken models. If you got the time to fix them, you can do that. So here's the shameless plug. This is one of the shows that I enjoy attending quite a bit, is the March Meet in Chicago. It's one of the largest in the nation. And when I originally heard about the March Meet, I thought, yeah, okay, it's going to be a bunch of high dollar brass, nothing that I'm really going to be able to afford. Well, of course, I went there, and absolutely the opposite was true. I found stuff that was quite affordable. I found a few broken items that were pennies on the dollar to buy, and I took them home and fixed them and added them to my collection. So it's really a good show. It's March 14th, 17th. There are other shows. Unfortunately, in my position, I can only make one show a year, and I got to make it a dandy. And this one's closest to me. I'd love to go out and see some of the East Coast shows. I'd love to go to the West Coast shows, but unless I become a little wiser with my money, I'm probably not going to get out there to see those shows. But anyway, I will. Future shows, I'm gonna talk about the space that O-Scale takes up. I know that a lot of people think you've got to have a warehouse, and I've got a couple of layouts that I'm going to feature in future shows. My son has a layout in his basement, which is 25 by 30. And from the photographs, you'd swear that it was a huge model railroad, but it's basically crammed in. And my layout is even smaller. Mine is 21 by 14. So my layout is much smaller, but you follow John Armstrong's suggestions of, view blocks and mirrors and such, you can make it look much larger. So that's a future show. And then I've got a friend of mine over in Fargo that I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that he has built for, I doubt that he's got $100 in any one model. He has built stuff. And I told Jim the other day when I talked to him, I said, this guy could walk into a beauty salon and come out holding 3 items that would look great on O-Scale, because this one looks like a, part of a tank car or something. So he's just fantastic when it comes to that kind of thing. And then another show I'll be talking about is 3D printing. And I do have one picture of that I'd like to show you guys, because I'm absolutely astonished at what level 3D printing is already worked up to. This little caboose is a 3D printed model, and everything about it's 3D printed. Now we talked him into removing the grab irons and just including a strip of wire that you can bend the grab irons, because they were a little bit heavy duty. Same thing with like the ladder, but still, I thought I would show just a 3D printed caboose. And I'm astonished at the quality of these things at this point in time. And I know it's only going to get better, but that once again will be for another future show. So anyway, I will hand her back over to you, Jim. That's kind of my introduction to what my shows are going to be about. I promise they'll be a little more organized next time around. So thanks again, Jim. And if anybody is interested in looking up more about O-Scale, they can go to that O-Scale Central, the sponsor of this. They've got a lot of good information on there. They've got O-Scale people listed on their dealership list. So you can kind of get a good feel for what's going on out there in the world. It's maybe not what you think, but hopefully we can introduce some new people to O-Scale. And I know we've got a few O-Scalers on the show. So anyway, back to you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you next month.
Hey, thanks so very much. I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. Does anybody have any questions for Dave? We will have emails for next show for Dave and for everybody else who's doing one of these scales, so that if you have questions for him, you'll be able to email him. But we haven't got those set up yet, but we will have those shortly. And it's funny, but there are so many different parts of O-Scale. I think grudgingly they allow me to participate, even though I'm a traction guy. I have the same scale, so they allow me at least to say I'm an O-Scaler. But I enjoy the scale and hope that you'll look into it a little bit. Now, one of the things that you heard Dave talk about Lionel. I grew up with Lionel. That's the first train I ever got. Loved it, still do. The next show segment isn't on Lionel, but it's on O-Scale from a different perspective. It's O-Scale High Rail. And Dennis Brennan is going to be the host for this segment of the show. We're going to do this once a month, the same as we're doing O-Scale once a month. So Dennis, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Hi, guys.
Dennis, maybe you can explain a little bit about what on earth 3-rail, high rail is.
Absolutely. I can do it. I don't see my picture up. Am I not up on the screen yet? Or
You're not
Sure are.
spotlight. Pat, can you spotlight him?
He's spotlighted
Oh.
every time he talks.
oh, I didn't. Okay, never mind. Anyway, I'm a high railer. Okay, well, what is high rail? Well, if you ask 10 different people, you're probably going to get 10 different answers on what high rail is.
Hold it, Dennis, hold it a sec. Pat, he may be spotlighted somewhere, but he's not on my screen.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, but
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. Anyway, if you ask 10 people what high rail is, you're going to get 10 different answers. And what I can tell you is what it is not. It's not the plywood central. Okay. It's not, or the carpet central or the plywood prairie plywood. It's not that. Well, what is it exactly? Well, let me begin by telling you how I got here, and then maybe that will add a little bit of sense to it. I started with Lionel trains like everybody, or like most of us. All of us who are in my age bracket, we started with our first train sets and we loved our Lionel trains. But I remember when I had my 4x8 layout on a sheet of plywood, I would look at that and I wasn't real crazy about exactly how it looked, but my imagination would imagine all of those scenes that I would see, those art scenes that were drawn in the Lionel catalog. I could see that in my mind. And that's what I saw with my Plasticville houses and the little cardboard streets and stuff that I put down. And I even attempted a scratch build one. I did one little building. And then I grew up and I got married. And we're going to jump to, I lived in Duluth, just like our former speaker here. And I put together a layout figuring I'd do all the stuff the right way. And I got as far as all the bench work and stuff. And it ended there because I didn't know where to go with it. I didn't know. And then we moved and ended up in the Kansas City area. And I started to lay out in my basement and I just decided to go for it. And I realized I love my Lionel trains, but I really want realism. I wasn't happy with the track. So the first thing I did was replace the track with Gargraves, which was the only thing available at the time. Now we have Atlas O, okay, in 3-rail. But then we didn't. So I used Gargraves, which is got wooden ties and a black center rail. And I painted the rail and I did the ballasting, my ballast, of course. Anyway, then Lionel came out with what they called Standard O. Now, Standard O was made to O scale, actually made to O scale standards, except that you had the tin plate trucks and couplers. And I stopped running all of my Lionel smaller stuff, which is slightly smaller than 148, typical Lionel. And I started buying Craftsman kits. And I realized that I was a high reeler. Now, I got that term from a Walters catalog. And then I did some research. And the Walters catalog, the first time they issued that term high reel and described what it was back in, I believe it was 1951. And I'm going to read you just a brief, it was a 51. It was their 18th annual O-scale catalog. They don't even make that O-scale catalogs anymore. But back then, this is what they said, and I'll read you part of it. When you decide to become a true scale model railroader, you've been convinced that you should discard all of your toy equipment and go whole hog into scale. However, it's not necessary, even at this stage, to abandon your high rail track, eliminate the third rail, or adopt direct current for propulsion. We have seen many model railroad layouts that will be classed as scale, yet continue to use the center rail and alternating current. And then they talk about the track should be a 36-inch radius. That way you could use any kind of scale car that you want, as long as you use your, a standard coupler. Because you had to, if you're going to use standard O-scale cars to go with your Lionel stuff, you had to adopt a standard coupler or make a transition car that had a scale coupler on one end and Lionel coupler on the other. Okay, but it said, then they went on to say it's apparent, well, I went on to say it's apparent from that thing in the 1951 catalog that high rail was already in use because they talked about it. They said, so I wondered, where did that come from? So I did some more research and I found a guy named Warren Morgan. Now, Warren Morgan, he coined the term, and that term, I'm going to share a screen here with you right here. Did that come up? Do we have that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Warren Morgan developed this term, and it's because his kids wanted to do more than just Lionel trains. They wanted to use scale equipment with Lionel, and they figured out a way to do it. And here's what Warren said. This is an excerpt out of the book that he wrote. They wanted to know, it says, in this 1954 book, he relates a conversation he had with his sons, referring to himself as Dad, about the layout they were building. All right, boys, you win, Dad admitted. We'll go model railroading with tin plate and as much 1/4-inch scale equipment as we can adapt to it. We ought to have a club, said Jack one night, with a secret sign or password or something. So Dad thought it over and came up with an idea. Well, when I served in World War I, they called us rails. And whenever they saw our shoulder patch, the insignia of the 13th Engineer Railway, they shouted, "Hi, rail." It got to be more or less a common greeting between soldier railroaders. What do you say that we use that term just among us? Well, that's where it started. And then Morgan wrote many articles, just like Frank Ellison back in the day at the same time. And he convinced the National Model Railroad, NMRA, to consider and to accept high rail as a legitimate form of model railroading, which they did. And that was back in, I believe, 1951 or 1950. So that's how we got to the term. And that's where it is. So right now, that's what I do. My modeling is strictly scale, except for the 3-rail track, and I still use Lionel couplers. Now, there's some high railers who even take it further than that, and they have adopted scale couplers. They put KDs on their cars. And in fact, Atlas O for 3-rail even makes that easy. You can remove the trucks and put on scale couplers. There's a mounting for them. So anyway, that's where that comes in. Here's a little shot. I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this screen. Is that up there now?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's that's a scene from the Sandy Harbor Terminal Railroad, which was a project layout that I built for Classic Toy Trains. This is what I consider high rail modeling. As you can see, that it looks as good as any two-rail model railroad anywhere. Those buildings are all kit bashes from simple plastic kits. That's a Lionel electric substation kit. There's 5 of them that I use to make this. This is a Plasticville airplane hangar. These are Lionel like factory buildings that have been doubled in height, kit bashed. And then these buildings back here are HO. And those water tanks up there are HO, all to force the perspective. And this is a chain link fence kit that I offer. And this is some of my ground cover right here. And so that's high rail. And in the coming months, what I hope to do is introduce other people that are high railers. I will show some of my work. This is another shot of mine. I'll show my work as well as others. I photographed layouts all over the country for Classic Toy Trains, and a lot of them that I shot were high rail. And so we can see what other modelers are doing. Really, the only difference is the fact that we've got 3-rail track, and we might be using oversized couplers. And that's about it. So I think that'll be it for this segment, and unless anybody has some questions.
Anybody have any questions for Dennis on this tonight? This is why you've heard me say.
This is Mike in Florida.
Yes.
What is the actual height of the rail, since we're talking high rail?
Well, what is the actual height of the rail is about twice, maybe not quite twice as high as your scale rail, but I don't think it's twice. What code is scale rail? Is it?
Yeah, usually 148 or 156. So you're talking it's going to be taller than that.
Yeah, it's a little taller than that. But
okay.
But
good.
as you can see, as you saw, I can. That's easy enough to deal with.
Okay, I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Sure.
I think
172 is O scale. If you want to run with tin plate wheels, 172 code rail.
Then, yeah, I think that's what Atlas makes their rail. So, although it seems big when everything else is built up to it and stuff and is correctly ballasted, really you don't see a big difference. I mean, unless you're a rivet counter and you're going to freak out over that. But then if you're a rivet counter, you want to go Proto 48, no? So, any other questions?
I guess from my standpoint, the reason this is important is because this is all modeling. That's what this show is all about. I don't really care whether it's 2-rail or 3-rail. I think what you'll see, both from what Dave Schultz is going to show you from 2-rail modeling and what Dennis is going to show you with high-rail modeling, you can easily see the same manufacturers, the same kind of scratch building, the same kind of scenery, the same kind of detailed scenes created. The difference is the track, the wheels, the couplers. Maybe the cars themselves are overscaled. But as Dave Schultz said, some of Lionel now, they're producing scale cars in O scale. that can run either 2-rail or 3-rail.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that from a manufacturer's standpoint, a seller's standpoint of products, they don't really care whether it's high rail or scale, because they're selling basically the same products. It's just that the rails are different, and the trucks and couplers are different. And I think as we go through the series, you'll be able to see that more and more from both Dennis and from Dave Schultz. So Dennis, Dave, thanks again so much for your participation tonight.
Oh, can I put one more
Sure.
plug in here? If there's any high railers out there who would like to be a part of this segment, please contact me, and I'll put my email in here. You can contact me at Brennan's Model RR, Dennis at Brennan'sModelRR.com, and I'll put it in the chat thing. Or you can call me. I'll put my phone number and the email in there. So I'd love to talk to you. If you're not all that convinced that that you're ready, just talk to me. We'll talk about it. Doesn't hurt to talk to me, and maybe we can come up with a plan for you. Okay? Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. Well, now I want to introduce Martin Breckville, Martin MMR. And Martin is going to continue his discussion on Scratchbuilding Corner. So Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. You're stuck with another O-scale modeler. It's terrible, horrible. Okay, well, there we go. All right, the horror. Okay, so I left off this photo last week. It disappeared. Anybody who remembers, I'm sure we have adequate memory to go back 168 hours. So there's where the pipe rack goes on McCandless pipe. Finally got that installed and found the photo, and there it is. And that wraps up that build. No, I'm not done tonight. We got another 10 or 12 slides at least. So we're going to back ourselves up over and for a refresher on a quick build of a truss rod car base. And why? Because I'm going to use this a lot. As I think I made a point once upon a time, is that starting with this, I've probably built close to 200 cars from scratch in the last 10 or 12 years, and probably a dozen a year as it is. But we'll just start over just to refresh memories. We have a pile of sticks. Side end sills, joists, needle beams, car bolsters. And in this particular case, I'm fairly arbitrarily using, oddly enough, HO lumber from Kapler, which, by the way, was bought. So Kapler's not out of business. They're still with us. But this is 10 by 22s and 8 by 22s, or 12 by 22s and 8 by 22s in HO lumber, which is, you can cut that in half roughly, and now you're down to O scale, and it's fairly hefty stuff. And we have bolsters. Those are ones that I cast in resin. And once upon a time, I did a show, an hour or 40 minutes on resin casting. It's fun. It's easy. It's chemistry. And my being a chemist by profession, I don't even think about it. It's second nature. And just to do resin casting. So there's our boards. There's our basic frame, basic parts, and bolsters. There are the size of the pieces right there. The needle beams vary out depending on my mood, or how heavy duty a car I'm looking at, or how light duty a car I'm using. Pretty much just grab stuff and go. It's not too complicated. First step, very easy. You build a box, okay? 2 ends, 2 sides out of the heavier stuff. to build a box. In this case, I'm just using 3x7 decking. I'm using 3x7 because I have a lot of it and I have no good use for it except to make decking out of it. So that's a good way to make it go away. It's a nice sized piece of wood for decking though. And it's not 3x6, not 3x8, but okay, it comes out. Oddly enough, it came out pretty close to almost exactly even for this car. Okay, now we get a little challenging. We run the train line through this. So these two center sill pieces, gotta drill a hole, fairly good size hole, probably about a number 55, give or take a little bit, at an angle, offset each two pieces. So it helps to bend the train line piece first and then mark the sticks, drill the hole. I'm using a small hand drill. I mean, this isn't a, a small powered hand drill. I'm not going to worry about getting into modeling size tools necessarily. It's one of the nice things about O-Scale. You can grab a power tool off the shelf and just drill holes through stuff. You can't see it, but both ends, there's a hole in both ends for that train line to exit. And this is preformed. Down here at the far end, you can see a little difference in color. That's a piece of 3/64 OD brass tubing that's been soldered onto the 32 thousandths wire from T-sheet. That gives you a union joint. So you can connect two pieces together without having to use glue or anything. You just and pray a lot over it. You can actually insert it and have an actual union joint just like you're doing real plumbing. So there we go. Now you can see the ends, that 32 thousandths wires out both ends, excessively so, and more decking, and we add the other joists, and this is where the smaller two joists go in between. And I like to cheat when I build these cars. You can see these marks on the end. The one in the center is the center. These two just happen to coincidentally line up where the screws go for a KD coupler box. Fancy that. How incredibly convenient. And if you split the difference between the two, that's where these two outer ones go. We're done. We're spread across. And you're just gluing this all together with tight bond carpenter's glue. Nothing's fancy or sophisticated here. Finish the decking. And actually, the decking is what holds it all together. Because when I'm tacking that box together to begin with, that's just a little bit of goo to hold it in place. The decking is what really holds it all together. And you've got 60, 70 joints times 6, all with tight bond glue. And that makes a pretty good solid piece of joinery. I've dropped these many times, never broken one. And I got a nice concrete floor in my shop, except when it lands on my foot, which may or may not be harder. Okay, bolsters. I cast these by the dozens. Whenever I'm doing resin casting jobs for other people, I'm pulling out one or four of my molds of bolsters, and all the excess resin gets dumped into these. And I actually sell these to fellow O-Scale modelers who are converting 3-rail models to 2-rail, because a lot of the 3-rail cars lack a proper bolster underneath them, and they want to convert it. Very simple. Drill it and tap it for 440. Okay, some people like 256. Some people like 632. I'm going to take the middle road at 440. And nice thing about tapping resin, you can run the tap right through the hole with your hand drill, variable speed hand drill, back, forth 5, 6 times. It's done. It's ready to go. And you can do this after you put glue it to the car if you forget, but it's a lot easier if you don't. Do it now, makes it a lot easier. Okay, we just glue the bolsters in. Needle beams are installed, and there's the basic car. Well, there's a lot of other stuff to add, but that's the basic car. Basic K-brake. Okay, so I know I went over installing K-brake is, June, July. There was a show, so it'll be on YouTube somewhere. Fairly easy to do. Parts are readily available. If they're not, you can make them. The K-brake itself is a resin casting of mine. There's a lot of places to buy those parts from. There's no shortage of that. The clevises are actually the most interesting thing here. I make those out of Grant line turnbuckles that are cord for 25 gauge wire. So it saves a lot of trouble. And if you're going to make one, well, make 5 or 6. There's 4. The truss rods are in. They're not up on the queen post yet, but they are under tension now. So when I lift them up, they're going to be under a lot more tension. These 4 are actually going off to become gondolas. I don't know which one's going to be which gondola. I have to look at the Clover House dry transfers. And if it's a 36-foot car, that's these aren't all the same size. Some of these are 40 and some are 36 foot. And I have, I think, 2 of each, and I have dry transfers. But we're not even going to talk about those for, well into next year, easily into next year. These are just going to, it's just foreshadowing of a distant future because there's these 4, but then there's 4 more. So these 4 get bumped up close to the top of the list, and there's all different sizes here. As you can tell, these are all different. These are anywhere from 32 foot up to about 38 feet cars. It's a nice thing about scratch building cars. You can make them any size you want. And if you're going to do this, in my case, setting up the assembly line and grinding out 4 at a time or 8 at a time, it's pretty easy. In fact, I think I did 4 of these at the RPM meet back in September, sitting at a table demonstrating how to build stuff. It took me about 6 hours, but I got about this far on 4 cars, and there we go. So they're ready to go. But we're not going to use any of these either. Next week, we'll start with the 9th car, and we're going to build something completely different. And it has nothing to do with John Cleese or Monty Python, but it will be something different. A car unlike anything I've built before, too. So this will be an adventure for everybody, myself included. And I'll see you next week, and we'll get started on that project. Any questions?
I have a question. Martin, the needle beams are what the queen posts are attached to, right?
Yes, they rest upon them.
Why are they called needle beams? Do you know?
Dick, if I know, there's probably a good reason, a good explanation. Somebody probably knows, but it's not me.
Okay, thanks.
I'm amazed I even remember the name of them. Half the time I forget.
Anybody else have any questions? Martin, thanks so very much. See you next week.
Yep.
Well, now I want to go to Kurt Buckner. Kurt was with us last week and showed us some of his fantastic window interiors. And so I'm interested to see what you've got for us tonight, Kurt. Is Kurt not with us?
I don't see him.
Okay, he just couldn't make it tonight.
He's here. I see him.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't have anything planned for tonight, unfortunately.
All right. Well, okay, then I'm sorry. I thought you did. No problem.
Oh, catch me next time, I guess.
Oh, that sounds good. Thanks so much, Kurt.
Bye-bye.
So let me turn to Burr Stewart. And when Burr and I talked, one of the things that really got me was Burr said, well, you know, there is sometimes when prototype is just not fun. So Burr, welcome.
Thank you very much. Jim, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I can do that reasonably quickly. We want to share a PowerPoint. There we go. And we want to go into play from start. Now, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So Jim asked me to do a sort of a follow-up talk on, well, when does modeling the prototype stop being fun? And I would rather do a larger panel discussion, but I'm just going to throw out some provocative ideas about how you can go astray. And in a way, it's not that different from, if you've looked at Lance Mintheim's new book on scenery, one of the things he talks about is some of the mistakes you can make just by picking the wrong color of green, and then it throws off your whole realism. And this is, maybe I'm just saying some of the mistakes I think I've made that reduce the amount of fun from modeling the prototype. So I'll start just with this background point. Why do we play with trains? There are all these different focus areas. Rail fanning is a lot of fun. Model building, which you do a lot in this forum. Collecting, which I think is a lot of fun. I know a lot of people love collecting stuff. I never saw a train that I didn't want in my collection, even though I try to have some discipline about that. It's certainly a lot of fun. And then operating can be a lot of fun, but it's also really scary sometimes for people. So I just want to talk about what I've noticed when copying the prototype faithfully can interfere with the fun that you can have, especially with operations. But I'll talk about some of the layout design issues as well. Let's go forward. Oh, and a key point in this whole thing is fun for whom? The operator or the visitor or the layout owner? And one of the things I've noticed is I've done a lot of things for my own fun, which just make things complicated and annoying for the people that come to run trains here. And so that's part of what I also want to alert you to. So first of all, in terms of operations, during COVID, when we were all kind of locked down and freaked out, Cal Sexsmith did a nice article in the Layout Design SIG journal about modeling Victoria, British Columbia prototypically. And he listed all of the different industries there and what tracks they were on. And I thought, I could just build a 3-track N-scale layout with 2 switches and some cards to indicate these prototypical locations and do some switching, just use colored dots for the different industries, numbers in the dots for the different spots on the 3 tracks. And believe it or not, this took me about 45 minutes to switch this layout. And I just had a blast that entire 45 minutes. I was sitting by myself with this one engine and these 3 tracks. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So don't let prototypical operations scare you. Just try it. It can be a lot of fun. This is the class lecture, I guess you could say, but there are a lot of approaches to operations, and I just want to briefly mention them in case you're not familiar. At the simple level, you can just bring a train into a town, and if you see a boxcar at a siding, you can pick up the boxcar, and if you see a boxcar in your train, you can put the boxcar in your train in the siding. You don't have to know what the car number is. You don't have to know what's in the car. You don't have to know anything. You just swap similar car types, and this is a lot of fun. A lot of people do this for their operations. You can also make a car order for each spot in each industry by car type, and then you can have some cards that you switch around between the yard and the industries to make a little bit more realistic type of movement. But again, you still don't have to look at the car number, which is really great if you're in N-scale, for example, but you're getting a little bit more prototypical. And then, of course, there's the famous sticky dots or car tabs, which I think, if I recall, John Allen used to use them, and many people still do in a variety of ways. I've been playing around with it myself just for fun, and it's a pretty easy thing. You just see the color on the tab, and you know where to take the car. Again, you don't need to know what the car number is. And then, of course, we get to the car cards and waybills, where you make a card for the car, and you make a waybill that sits in the pocket. of the card, and you can have an incredibly realistic operation by having all sorts of movements described on these waybills that can be as prototypically accurate as you have time to do the research for. Now, once you have figured out all that research, you can handwrite switch lists for each train based on waybills that are either in car cards or in some other form. And of course, the computers get pulled in to track car locations and print out switch lists. So you don't have to handwrite the switch lists and you don't have to handle car cards. You can just have a printout from a computer telling you what to do. So this is the sort of range of operations approaches that we typically see. And what you or your operators find fun may have to do with a number of factors. And so one of them is your learning style. And as you probably know, 60% of us have a visual learning style where we like to see things, diagrams, and so forth. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm used to seeing drawings and charts and so forth all my life. This is how I think. And then there are 30% of us that are auditory learners, meaning we need to read it or hear it in a linear way. With sentences and syntax and so forth. And I would guess that a lot of computer programmers are like this too, because if you think about a computer program, it's a very linear set of instructions. And then the 10% of us are called kinesthetic learners, which the only way we learn something is to just get our hands dirty and do it. And if we do it, we can learn it. And of course, that is a small group, but it is an important thing to remember that some people are not going to respond to either maps or visual things or written materials. They're only going to respond to take that train and move it over there with those cars. Of course, the other thing that really interferes with fun in an operating session is how much time pressure you're under. And a lot of us who host operating sessions do a lot of things to try to slow everyone down because they tend to just pressure themselves to get the work done quickly. Now, one of my favorite ideas I got from Joe Green was to set all my locomotives to 30 miles an hour, maximum speed, so that you can't really go anywhere very fast because the engine simply won't move that fast. And of course, the other big thing is where are you on the learning curve? And there's more than one learning curve. There's learning about the prototype. There's learning about my particular railroad. There's learning about how to use DCC decoders, you name it. There's all kinds of learning curves. And I remember going downstairs after an operating session one day and looking around at where everything was and discovering that one pair of operators had taken a train to the completely wrong end of the layout, and it was in the staging yard. It was just in the wrong staging yard. I was thinking, wow, that's amazing. But where they were on the learning curve, they still hadn't really figured out which staging yard represented which, destination. So just briefly to characterize what I think is a difference between car cards and waybills versus computerized switch lists. I'm getting a little bit off the tangent, but I promise to get back on it. For car cards and waybills, the car forwarding data is on the layout on the waybills in the car cards. Whereas in a computerized switch list, all the car forwarding data is on the computer, and there isn't any information on the layout about what cars are supposed to be doing, except what's printed out in the switch list. With car cards, the people figure out what work to do because they grab the car cards, they figure out which ones need to go in their train based on the destination. Whereas in a computerized switch list, the computer figures out what to do and simply gives you a switch list telling you to do it. Now, in between sessions, the restaging is I find it a fun hands-on activity where I've got car cards, I've got cars, locomotives, and I've got to, figure out if I can flip the waybills to a different destination, change out the locomotives, whatever is needed to be done. Now, with a computerized switch list, the people do whatever the computer tells them, whether or not it makes sense. And if they don't do it right, you've got a big reconciliation job to figure out how to get the computer to understand where the cars actually ended up. And so in my very biased opinion, with car cards, crews can keep their car cards in train order so they know exactly what is happening, what's supposed to happen. It's very easy to set up a block of cars for various destinations. And with computer switch lists, the cars are listed in random order on the switch list, and you spend all your time trying to reconcile what is on the switch list versus what is in your train versus what is in the sidings. And I personally have never found this even remotely fun. I find it a huge headache. And I think the reason is that I'm a visual learner, and there's nothing visual about a switch list. It's simply like reading a poem or something. You know, it's a document with a whole bunch of lines of text. And so it's you can say it's a matter of preference, and I'm also saying it's kind of a matter of learning style or something like that. So here's an example of one of my car cards. The purple tells you that it's in the purple town, Skycomish, and it's obviously it's a hopper going to a gravel quarry. And if you're working a yard, each track has a box, and each of these car cards represents where the trains are supposed to go, and the car cards are in train order. And you can see a little bit here. On the left, there's a blue group, and you can see the little header there. For blue is northbound, and so all those cars need to go northbound, and these ones do too. So you can see these two tracks, the cars need to be combined into one train, and behind them there are some red cars that need to go south, and they'll be combined. So on some other layouts I've seen, you have something that called a handwritten switch list, which is supposedly more prototypical. Now, I get that prototype crews used handwritten switch lists. I do understand that is prototypical. But if you're dealing with this switch list, you have to figure out where are these cars in your train, because there's no guarantee that the list is in train order. And so, like I said, you're into a mind game. And of course, the next level of this is a computer printout. And this is my own attempt to use JMRI Ops for my N-scale layout. And this is just an example of a printout that it gave me. And you can see from all these check marks that I did succeed in getting most of the way through this switch list. And actually, if memory serves, I did get all the way through it, but I didn't enjoy myself. I mean, I kept looking to say, okay, wait, this boxcar is where, and paper shipping outside is where, and okay, here I changed, for some reason, I changed the destination. And then I discovered that there was the wrong car was in my train. It had the wrong car number. So then I had to go look for the car number. So I was just wasting a bunch of time getting this done. And I didn't find it fun. Now, somebody would say, well, but the program was giving you a bunch of very realistic random destinations for these cars. And you didn't have to flip a waybill and every 4 times repeat yourself. And there's, that's true, sort of. But I don't really have any confidence in the random nature of what the computer program was doing. It wasn't a bunch of shippers ordering cars. And so anyway, that's the end of my rant about how much I prefer car cards to computer switch lists. But I know there's a lot of people who are using them, and those layout owners are spending a lot of time behind computer screens trying to keep everything reconciled. And I'm not doing any of that. I'm having fun with my layout and all my car cards, just making sure everything's staying, together. And again, back to the visual thing, this is the color map of the layout, and you can see my Skycomish area waybill is going to the purple Skycomish, which is on the very east end of the railroad. And so no matter where you're operating here, if you have a car card with the purple on it, it needs to go towards the left and end up here in Skycomish. So somewhere in here in the green zone, you need to get it shifted over so that it can get to Skycomish on this route. Some people feel that car cards is like switching color dots. It's not prototypical. And I'm just saying, with the learning curve challenges of everybody, it's very helpful to have a color scheme that people can understand. And I particularly like this one because the geographically, the warm colors are to the south and the cold colors are to the north. So the forest colors are right in the middle of the layout. So it's not too hard to figure out when we're sorting cars where you're supposed to be sending them. So now I'm just going to give some other examples of prototype, getting carried away with prototype modeling. So this is a picture of the prototype north end of Inner Bay Yard. And it's a place I've done a lot of rail fanning, and I was always fascinated by how the yard, which is behind us in this picture, went from 4 tracks to 2 tracks, and these 2 switches were right next to each other. And I thought, gosh, if I could model 4 tracks going to 2 tracks, and those 2 tracks going out of town, as they do, excuse me, that would be really cool. That would be a signature piece of track work that everybody would recognize, and I would feel really good about how I was modeling the prototype. And I built this on my north end of my Inner Bay Yard, just like this, and I was very, very pleased with myself. And what ended up happening, and this is a little bit later after I modified it, but you can see I had the 4 tracks here going down to 2 tracks, and these 2 switches were parallel to each other, just like they were in the prototype. And like I say, every time I looked at this, I said, I know where that is. It's exactly like the prototype. It's very cool. Well, after a few operating sessions, and they were absolutely chaotic, and you can see the Inner Bay Yard here. The track work I was showing you before is behind us in the photograph. It was very clear that this yard master could not possibly keep up with the traffic unless we had a yard lead for this ladder, for all this switching. And so what we did was to, if I back up for a second, we added we added a switch in here so that we could extend the yard lead way, way out past. So if I made a mark here on the prototype photo, we inserted a switch here and we ran the yard lead way out here. So we have 3 tracks going out towards the Salmon Bay Bridge instead of 2. And that's totally unprototypical. But boy, does it improve the operations and make the whole thing a lot more fun for everybody. So the yard master can be drilling this yard continuously while various other trains are going in and out of the arrival departure tracks and so forth. My second example is the town of Everett, and I did an article in the Layout Design Journal 43 in the summer of 2011 about this, if you want to look that up. But this is one of the most complicated and interesting railroad towns you'll ever find. There's a double track main line coming up from Seattle towards Everett, and the main line to Chicago heads through a tunnel over to Lowell and then east to Spokane and eventually Billings and Minneapolis and so forth. The old Great Northern Main Line. And then the second track runs up along the coast of the town and around to the Delta Y, where if you go left, you go to Vancouver. If you go right, you go into this huge Delta Yard, and then you can proceed towards Chicago again. And I did an enormous amount of track planning to try to figure out how on earth I would fit this into a peninsula on my layout. And eventually, I came up with a plan, which is very much of a compromise, but it did sort of do the job. At least I had the Delta Y, so the train could come into Bayside Yard. It could go left to go to Vancouver, and it could go right to go to Chicago. Now, this is a picture from the Great Northern Railway Historical Society of the actual track alignment in Bayside, which, as you can see here, is even more complicated than the diagram that we had in the publication. There was actually 2 yards along the shore. One of them was for the Scott Paper Mill, and that was this one, and the other one was for the various other industries that were up to the north end. So there were industries up here that were served by this end, and there were a big paper mill that was served down here. 2 yards, one after another. And of course, there was also a passenger station down here before the two split. Now, if I turn that upside down, I can show you what I ended up doing, which is lapped yards. And if you've heard of a lapped siding, it's a siding with a crossover in the middle, except that the main line goes straight through and the siding, one siding is on each side. And I just saw something in the Model Railroad Planning 2007. Dave Hussman did a nice little sidebar on the advantages of lapped sidings. Anytime you put a crossover in the middle of a siding, you have a whole bunch of additional operational advantages, even if the prototype didn't have one. So what I ended up doing, and since I didn't have room to do 1 yard after the other, was to put 1 yard on one side and 1 yard on the other side. And this is not prototypical. And I mean, the point of my talk is sometimes varying from prototype can be more fun than copying the prototype religiously. And furthermore, if you see here, the main line is on the back of the yard, on both yards, but I wanted to see the main line trains run through. So we put the main line in the front so the main line would come along, and then we have all the switching behind the main line. And then, of course, the other thing is this was where the Scott paper mill was. And that would mean putting that up here in the aisle. So I put the Scott paper mill in the back where I had room for some tracks. And again, that's not prototypical, but we still are handling all of these wonderful wood chip cars, and we're making toilet paper, every time we operate here. So it doesn't matter that it's on the wrong side of the aisle. And I've thought a lot about, well, why don't I just put in some trackage here and put the Scott paper mill in front of the main line? And I keep thinking, I don't want to block the view of all these mainline trains. And so anyway, that's just a good example. And for just to end this issue, this is a view of the current yard, and you can see the Scott yard here and the new yard on the left there with the Port of Everett. And you can also see the wood chip cars here that we have inside. But my wife and I do a lot of swing dancing with big bands, and I wanted to really celebrate how much fun social dancing is. So I put a big dance hall right out here by the station, and there's no prototype station here, but we do want the passenger trains, when we run them, we want them to stop at a station. So I put the station in the wrong place, but right in front of the action, so everybody can see these dancers, and I can proselytize, to everyone who sees the layout about how much fun dancing is, forget about model railroading. So anyway, these are just examples of, having fun and not getting too slavish about copying the prototype. And I showed you this before, the sort of, if people don't necessarily want to keep track of all that information, but at least here, right in front of the Bayside yard, we have the black dot saying, this is where you are. If you go to the left, you're only going to go to Bellingham or Skycomish. If you go to the right, you're going to go to all these other places. And these are the colors. So, this hopefully helps make it simple enough that people can have fun with it. So another example is, how much fun are spot numbers or track numbers? And, there's no answer to that question. It can be a lot of fun. This is the prototype Lone Star Cement in South Seattle, which I've loved looking at and always wanted to model. And I eventually did put this in the layout. I'm unspeakably proud of how cool this is. I've got the 3 tracks, just like the prototype, the silos. I mean, we still aren't done, obviously, but we've got the 4 tracks that are on the prototype, and they're full of the same cars, and I just love it. And we've got the tracks labeled Lone Star 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's cool, right? So here's the car card boxes for Lone Star Cement, track 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you look at these waybills that have all been spotted here, these are the ones we see in the picture, you can see the track 2 has waybills that say Lone Star Cement 2, and track 3 says Lone Star Cement 3. Isn't this amazing? Lone Star Cement 4. Somebody actually did the job of spotting all these cars into the correct track. And I don't know if they had fun doing it or not. I just was amazed at the end of the op session that this was so well done by somebody who loves switching. And that's what this is about, right?
Yep.
But I asked myself, wait a minute, does the prototype care what tracks these cars are on? They're just empty cement hoppers. They're going to fill them up and they'll have a waybill saying where they're supposed to be shipped. But for bringing in the cars to the plant, I shouldn't be labeling these for specific tracks, let alone spot numbers. What am I going to do? Say, put this car before that car, before that car. Like, it doesn't make any difference. They're just going to load them full of cement. You see what I'm saying? It's like we get carried away with, we can make sure the right car gets on the right track. And I'm just thinking, yeah, I think there are times it's fine to just say, throw 15 cars at that plant and just stick them on the loading tracks and call it good. Don't worry about which track it's on. So for another completely different thought, how many depressed center flats are prototypical on a layout? And this is timely because Class 1 ModelWorks is doing a huge amount of hyper marketing right now about their brand new depressed center flat cars. And I succumbed and bought 2 of them. I'm so excited with myself, even though I already had a perfectly good Burlington Northern Walthers depressed center flat car. And I remember an article from Tony Thompson where he analyzed freight car fleets, and you know how good he is at doing that. And he came up with the very unwelcome information that a typical layout should have fewer than 1 depressed center flat car statistically. Now, fortunately, even though he said that, I have a prototype photo here that I took right outside my office window one day of the Burlington Northern Main Line with no less than 3 of these beautiful depressed center flats with loads. And, this proves that it's okay for me to have 3 depressed center flats, even though Tony said fewer than 1 would be prototypically accurate for your fleet. So I want you to, I'm not saying go out and buy a 4-pack of those depressed center flats, but it's all about fun, right? So for my next example, and I'm almost done, there's a car repair shed in the Inner Bay Yard, which I always enjoy. And if you've ever rail fanned in Seattle, you've seen this car repair shed. It's a big operation. They repair cars all over the northwest part of the country. And I thought, I have to model this. It's right next to the yard that I'm modeling. And so the question is it a signature scene or is it an impediment? So I made this beautiful model, like I said before about the cement plant. I'm incredibly proud of this. Every time I look at it, I think, wow, you are one hot shot, super duper model railroader to build this. And, right in the right location, with the tracks. I mean, I know where I am. I'm in Inner Bay Yard. This is extremely cool. So here's an aerial shot of it as it stands today. And I did a bunch of work to make all this pavement as realistic as possible based on Google Maps photos, and there's asphalt here and gravel here, and there's a border. I mean, this is all super cool, right? And then there's some maintenance of way equipment, which is very prototypical that it's here. You know where I'm going with this, right? Maybe you don't. But look at the amount of space. How many bad order cars do I need to handle in a typical operating session? I got 3 bays here. And I'm looking at this yard, and so this is the typical operating situation, right? We got the yard master is just dying to have a little more track, and I don't have room to stick a bunch of more tracks here. But lately I've been thinking, wait a minute, can you imagine if I move the caboose track over here? I just cut this down to like a 1-track car repair shed. I could move the caboose track down here. I could add at least 2, if not 3 car lengths to each one of these 6 cars. That would be like a whole nother 12 to 18 cars of capacity in the yard, which this yard master would just die for during an operating session. So this is an example of modeling the prototype as a signature scene without realizing that maybe the trade-off, since this is also the signature yard, this is the main yard on the whole layout, maybe having a little extra track capacity in the main yard is more important than a prototypically accurate model of a car repair shed, which is of relatively little value in terms of operating interest. And finally, I don't know if you've seen these really cool electronic waste stations by Boulder Creek Engineering, but they are super cool. They have a little LED infrared sensor underneath the track scale, and they give you a readout of the weight of the card based on a random number generator. And so I dutifully installed one of these and then put, I think I have a picture of it, on some of my weigh bills, I said, weight at scale. So I gave a little spot for the yardmaster to weigh the car and put the weight of the car on there before he forwarded it on to the next location. Well, I'm here to say that I've had 10 or 15 operating sessions since I installed this, and it has been used twice. And it has been used twice only at the very end of an operating session, only by a very skilled yardmaster who was able to keep up with the work in that yard. And so I guess my point is, yes, it's cool that we have a working scale track scale. It's cool. And look, we have a scale test car, and we can run that thing in here. But it's so much work to run a big, complicated layout without all these little bells and whistles that it doesn't really make any difference. So I'm not sure if this adds to the fun or adds to the hassle. I'm just on the fence about it. And I think that's my point. It was just to run my mouth a little bit about sometimes we do things because they're prototypically accurate or cool, but they don't necessarily increase the fun because there's already too much fun. It's like, when is enough fun too much? And my YouTube channel is called Much Fun with Trains because I really do have a lot of fun with trains and I love sharing it with people. But you can totally sabotage yourself if you just obsess with, well, this is how the prototype did it, without thinking about, well, is it fun for people to do it the way the prototype did it? And, Jim, there's a million other examples, and I'd love to hear from other people on this same topic, because I think lots of people have made lots of trade-offs between what they can fit and what's fun versus what the prototype did. And I just think it's a fascinating topic. So thanks for your attention. I hope I didn't go too long.
Burr, I agree with you. I think it's also a fascinating issue that I don't hear people talk about. I hear it one way or the other. It's either, well, it has to be prototypical, or it's not correct. But I don't, or it's fun and I'm a freelancer and I don't worry about it. But talking about the trade-offs that are necessary from an operational standpoint and from a modeling standpoint, I don't really hear people talking about that, and that's why I jumped at a chance to ask you to be on the show and to start the discussion.
Yep.
So I thank you so much for being here. Does anybody have any questions or comments to Burr? Burr, thanks so very much.
Yeah. Bert, interesting presentation. You early in your presentation, you said like 10% are visual learners and others are active learners. Now, where'd you get that information?
It's 10% are kinesthetic, 60% are visual, and 30% are auditory, verbal, reading type learners. And I got it from some training class I went to, at my job years ago about how to teach people how to do the job right. And, it's sort of standard teacher training research, like what people respond to what type of learning tools.
And,
it's that those numbers are.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said I spent 40 years in education, 34 at higher ed, and in teacher education. And I've never seen those numbers before. And dividing learners up that way is really inconsistent with what the literature says. So I would take a look at that. Number one, we all can learn in different ways. We have tendencies or preferences that we feel more comfortable in. That's the problem with higher education of too much chalk and talk, or now PowerPoint and talk. But not all people learn that way. The other thing is, you've got individuals also who have learning disabilities and therefore are going to have some real difficulty with the numbers that you presented because they learn differently. And yet they can function. You may have a person who is working in your organization who does the job very well and yet has learning difficulties. So I'm really cautious about those numbers there. And the thing is that there's, you know what Venn diagrams are.
Yeah.
A lot of times if you tried to graphically show that, the different kinds of learners, there's overlap. There's overlap, even though a person is preferential to sitting and listening to a lecture and taking it all in, versus a person who says, I got to try it out. I've got to fiddle with it. I got to see my way. I got to have my failings in order for it to come together for me. I'm talking about an individual. So I don't want to go on about this, but I would take a real look at that and consider looking at that in terms of how you put together your presentation. I happen to be a partner with you in the car card approach, and the thing I see with the car cards and with model railroading is too often people think of model railroading as trains. Yes, that's true, but when you look at it in terms of the larger thing, model railroads or real railroads run for economic purpose. They move stuff. A whole warehouse full of refrigerators up in Minnesota by Frigidaire or whoever builds them up there, those refrigerators have potential value. They have real value when it's in my kitchen or your kitchen.
Right.
So therefore, value is created by moving those things. It's called place utility versus manufacturing utility, where we're changing the form of materials to create something. Transportation is place utility. And so the model railroad really ought to be run based upon the concept of place utility. Why is that stuff moved from A to B? And then how is it moved? It could be truck, it could be pipeline, it could be, et cetera. So the car cards then and the way bills should be built based upon the industry and what goes on in the industry. Now, the industry needs input and the industry has output. And what are the inputs going to a particular industry, whether it be a warehouse or it be a manufacturing plant? How does the stuff get in and what is it and how does it get there? And then you have your car cards will say, all right, we're going to have a box car of X going in because that's part of the input. Or we're going to have a box car going to pick up because that's part of the output. Those are the kinds of things that make the car cards work. And I like the car card thing because the car card, the way bill in the car card is really giving the railroad direction on the movement of stuff. And,
Listen,
I don't want to go on any further, but, those are things that I think ought to be built in. Go ahead, Jim.
Excuse me so much. I hate to break in here, but we've got other segments of the show that we have to get through tonight. What I'd love to do is have you back on, and Burr, if you'd like to come back on too, and talk about car cards and so forth. but I just don't have any more time on the show tonight.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
I apologize for having to stop it at this point, but you know, I have to get the other people on the show. Burr, thank you so very much. And like I say, if you'd like to come back and do a segment on it, please send me an email so I know who you are and so forth, because I don't know who the other gentleman is that was talking. So if you'll send me an email to jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com, then we can schedule a segment on the car cards, because I do think that would be interesting. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Burr. Well, now I'd like to go to Dennis Brennan again, for Dennis to continue building the My Build of one of his kits that's based on a Frank Ellison model. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. All right, gentlemen, we'll get right to it. I'll try to keep this short and sweet because it's not too hard this time. So we will just start here, and here we go. All right. Now, this is the Sanky Wanky Coffee Company, and for 2 weeks we've started. We did the foundation here, and we did. I forget what else did we do. We did the foundation, and and then we did these chimney sides, and that is sort of a sub-assembly process before we can actually put the four walls together. So what we're going to do this time is put the windows in. Now, if you look, and it's also the doors, if you look at the windows, you'll notice some of them are open, and that makes the window process not difficult, but there's another step or two involved rather than a simple assembly that it normally is. So we'll get right to it. Just you have, let's see here. Let's go right here. All right. So basically with your windows, you have a glazing sheet. A clear glazing sheet, and it's got paper on one side, and the windows are on a complete sheet of glazing, all in one particular sheet, and you just have to cut them out. And then you have the mullions or the window frames, which are on another sheet. Okay, so there's the glazing, and then there's the sheet of the frames, and then there's what we call a backer sheet. And the backer sheet is what you attach the glazing to the frames, and then you attach the frames to the backer sheet, and then the backer sheet is what gets stuck to the inside of the walls. It's really pretty simple. It sounds more complicated than it is. But what makes this a little bit different is that we have open windows, and the open windows, in order to do that, you have to have an upper and a lower sash. And whereas the windows that are closed, they have an upper and lower sash, but it's all in one piece. But the in order to do it and to be able to do it the way you would like, you can open it up any distance you want. So first, what we do is you have to paint the window frames. That's the first thing you got to do. And I used a gray primer, just a flat Rust-Oleum gray primer. Spray that sheet, let it dry. Okay. And then you can see that I've already applied. These are the open window frames. These are going to be the closed windows. The open window frames need that other sash on the bottom. We'll get to that. But for the first, you can see here, I've already applied the glazing on the back side. And that's what I did here. Now, the way these are made, is you'll turn this sheet over, and when you do, here's what you see. There's 3M sticky on the back. When you peel that off, there's sticky stuff underneath, and in order to do the glazing, you just peel off. So you can see that there's this little strip here. You peel that off, and then you add the glazing right to it. The glazing has already been added here, and you can see here's that full sheet, and we just add the glazing one piece at a time, and there's 10 of these that you can make open. Now here's the glazing sheet itself right here, and that's pretty simple. There's 2 attachment points for the glazing, and you just carefully cut those. They're little tiny points. You just cut them off with your X-Acto knife, and then you apply them to the window. But I'm also going to suggest that you make sure that there's no little nubs after you cut that out. Just make sure there's no little nub there. If there is, just take your little nail file that's in the kit and just scrape it off. 1 or 2 swipes will do it. That way it'll fit precisely in here and you won't have any problems. Okay, so then first you do all of the single window frames, and then you stick. You can see we took those out and we put them here, but now all of the double window frames we have cut out and we placed them on the glazing. That's typically the way I do it. Just place them all on the glazing and then pull them off, cut the glazing out, and now you've already got the whole thing. The upper windows were a little bit different, but this is typically how you do the windows. You just apply all the mullions to the window glazing sheet and then cut them out. And then again, use your little nail file and file off any nubs on the end of it. Otherwise, windows may not fit right. So, and you can see here, to apply these to, once you get that done, then you take this window and you pull that little strip off right around there and you stick the window down. That's all there is to it. And when you go to stick the window onto the building, you're going to peel off this outer layer. But until that happens, leave it on. And also, you can leave the paper. You got to peel off the paper, of course, before you stick these onto the glazing. But I always leave the paper on until you're ready to do this, and that way you don't have to worry about getting fingerprints on anything. Now with these pieces in front of you, it'll make a lot more sense if you're getting lost in this, but I'm assuming that you got the pieces in front of you and you can follow along with this. So when you apply the upper frames to the backer, to the open window backer sheet, you're going to have to glue those on because there's only sticky on one side. And so you're going to have to just take a little bit of super glue. And what I do is I take the liquid super glue, I put a little bit on a piece of wax paper, and I take a toothpick and I put the toothpick, roll it around in that glue and get just a little bit on the edge of the toothpick. And then I just place it around the side of the window, and capillary action will suck it in and glue it. You don't need much because there's no pressure on that. And then that's all there is to it. And then as far as the doors, the door panels, it's the same thing. The doors have overlays. I've already pre-sprayed them. You put an overlay, you pull off the sticky on the back of it, and you just stick it right onto the panel. And once you get that done, you peel off this centerpiece that's labeled backer, pull that off and stick the door on there. Okay. And then you see this gasket. Well, what the heck is that gasket? Well, what that does is that keeps the door from being right into the frame. You don't want the door to stick, to take up any of the frame. So I use a gasket to put the door back so that it's not in the frame, but it's in the opening, I should say. You don't want the door to protrude into the opening. The only part of the door that you want into the opening might be just this thin little piece, but you don't want this into it. So what I do is I just put that gasket on there, and that makes this even. And you'll see you'll see it when you put it together. It just gives a little bit more depth rather than having the door sit right in the center of the opening with no brick leading into it. And that's about as far as we want to go tonight. The next week, we'll talk about how we paint it and do the mortar and do the weathering. And then we're on the home stretch. So that's kind of short and sweet. If there's any questions, you can ask me now, or you can also give me a call or shoot me an email if you're having any problems. But a lot of guys have built these kits, and I've only had one person call me about something that was easily fixable. He just did something wrong. It was very simple to fix, but it wasn't a window. Just take your time, have fun. These things are really simple. They're fully illustrated. I've probably written the instructions better than I even explained them verbally. Like I said, the kit is all about having fun. And this is an O scale kit. It's also good for high rail, but 2-rail O scale. You guys should love this. It's a Frank Ellison deal. And I've said it before, he did things perfectly proportioned. And speaking about waybills and whatnot, he always gave his industries a purpose. And this was a Sanky Wanky coffee company. And so you'd get deliveries. No, you just have to think about what would be delivered and what would be shipped out. Well, they'd have to have boxes for shipping the coffee in, and the coffee was being manufactured there. So there had to be containers. If you think about all the things that would go into it, they'd have to get coffee, of course. You just think about what's got to be delivered. And then where does that come from? So if you've got boxes to deliver, where does that come from? Well, he had the Oblong Box Company, which was one of my kits. And then he had the Haphazard Packing Company, which made crates and packing. So, one industry begets another. So you have to think about that. And that all ties in with what we just heard. So with that said, I will turn this back to Jim, and thank you guys for allowing me to do this.
Well, Dennis, I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions about Dennis, about the windows and doors? Because they look pretty easy to me. I like the way that you've designed it.
Well, thank you. Try to keep things simple. I want to make it easy for people to do. It doesn't have to be a big chore, and they're not hard to do. You just have to take your time. And if you don't enjoy the process, then don't build a kit. You got to enjoy it. You got to be able to relax and just have fun doing it.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. Well, thanks so much, Dennis. See you next week.
All right. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening.
Well, now I want to turn to somebody that I've been really interested and have it on the show, and that's Tom Farrell. Tom is building, as you know, John Allen's masterpiece engine house. And this is going to turn out to be one I think is going to be one of Tom's masterpieces. So Tom, welcome, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be on the show. So, okay, this evening will be part 2 of which is going to be a 3-part series. I just worked like a banshee on this, and it's just a lot to bite off in a week. But I should have it done for next show, but it's turning out very nice. There's my this evening's art for art's sake photo. Okay, so I last let off with the flooring, and this is actually Monster Model Works wood siding in S scale. I wanted a little finer board here than the O scale offering, and as we have discussed and other modelers have discussed, like Greg Cassidy, for example, this is just a really nice material. It's all laser etched all the way down to the wood grain. My original intentions were to pre-stain this and then glue it down. I cut it, glued it down with super glue, then I stained it. My concern was warpage if I stained it outside of gluing it down. But it worked out well, there's no warpage. And there's the overall look. Now this whole model is in its fresh paint look right now. It'll all be weathered in the end, but these are all the base colors. Even that flooring will have things like grease spots, etc., on there. Little note that I missed, I put all this flooring down there. I forgot to weather these rails, to rust these rails. So I had to go in there with a fine paintbrush and rust these rails. That's note to self, next time rust the rails, then put in the flooring. This is the next wall. This is the back side of the wall. These, the difference between this wall and the other wall is this has a doorway in it. And if you recall, I painted everything with a brush and this white acrylic matte paint. And then I wanted an old-fashioned look, and I used this Floqual. I think this is the last time I'm going to use Floqual for anything other than bright silver, and their metallic colors. The fumes are just totally noxious. So if I can't find a craft paint, and there's hundreds of colors of craft paint, I'm just not going to use this stuff anymore. It's like poison. Just a little side note. Does a nice job, but it smells. I did go back and add more of the green. I'm looking for an old-fashioned look. This is after one coat. Subsequent coats will solidify these colors. I did a little more research on this weathering wash, the steel wool and white vinegar. I did an online search because my father said, he was 85, he said that this is a very old technique for staining wood. It's been around for, he believes, a couple hundred years. I couldn't find that, but I did find the chemical process here for anybody that's interested. But it basically, you're just dissolving the steel wool in this vinegar, and you're getting this this stain that instantly produces an aged look. That's a nice. Remember, I keep talking about this laser etching. If you can see that on your screens, that's just magnificent material. This is the beginning of the detailing of the outside. The John Allen engine house has these strips going down, and this outline adds a little detail to it. One of the reasons it took me, I spent a lot of time this week painting, painting that white, painting that green, painting this brown, and doing what I call a bounce, where if you get a little green on the white or white on the green, you got to go back with the white, cover up the green, and vice versa. You get it perfect. It's just a laborious process, but it gives you really nice results. You'll see in the end how that paid off. The windows, on the other hand, they got painted very quickly. I been meaning to try out this Rust-Oleum camouflage colors. They have about a half a dozen colors available. They're all flat. This is a flat brown. I sprayed all the windows and doors with this Rust-Oleum flat paint. It is dead flat. Here are the windows in place with the glazing. These are Tichy windows, and they had laser cut acetate that I simply glued in there with canopy glue. All this slop will come off. I'll clean these windows with a paintbrush and a cotton swab, but I've already did it. They come out pretty clean. I cut this door opening after I glued this wall in place because I wanted an exact fit. So I took a razor saw and just cut this out. And then I took an X-Acto knife and carved out the bottom. I got a perfect fit. I mean, you couldn't help but get a perfect fit when you glue the wall on and then cut it out. There's an up close. Look at that. I keep talking about this because I'm so amazed. There's never been anything like this in the hobby. Look at that wood grain. I mean, that's just mind-boggling for a model, you know? Look at that. That's just crazy. Yeah. There it is, even closer. Well, look at that. That's just really nice. I did draw this thing up in CAD, and I have to tell you that made a big difference because throughout this evening, I've used these printouts of the front of this building. I'll show you for various reasons. The first CAD printout was this template that I made that's from last week that was glued on a Strathmore board, but I used that as a template to cut the front entryway of the engine house. It made for an easy transfer onto the model. I printed it out again, and I rubber cemented it to the back side of the front. I could have just sketched this out and cut it out, but then I wouldn't get the location of that hole. Anyway, so what I did is to the back side, I glued this on, and then I cut it out around the perimeter. Then I crudely cut a hole in this to remove as much material as I could. And then I got this, they call it a rat tail, sort of a file, sort of a rasp. And I filed my opening for this window. You just have to be patient and, just keep working it and working it. You don't want to overcut it. I got a really nice fit. It's not really in place there. It's just for location. Again, there's my current favorite material on the planet. That wood grain. And then this is looking at the backside with the paper glued on. I've cut these out now. There's the front. Now, if you Google John Allen engine houses that aren't laser cut kits or aren't kit form, but scratch built, very few people model it with these radiuses in the front. And the reason is because it's very difficult to put the trim, the round trim, to come up with an idea to do round wooden trim and to get these radiuses perfect unless you're using CAD. There I've glued the front of the front piece on. You'll see there'll be little pieces that jump in here, and there'll be a post that comes down. But the model's starting to shape up here. There's looking at one wall, looking at the other wall. And looking down at the model, these are the beams starting to go in place. This will all get painted out. You won't see this. I left the paper on. I did try to remove it and it wouldn't come off without, so I just said, well, okay, I used rubber cement, but it wouldn't peel off. I just said, all right, we'll just leave it. And that's what I did. It gets painted white anyway. There's an up close of the floor. Now that's that S-gauge material. That was a good call on my part. I didn't want to use the identical material that was on the walls. And I wanted a tighter, like a 4x4-ish look to the floor. Here we are with these little pieces put in place. They're not quite filed in place in this beam. It's not crooked, it's my photography here. Dennis knows what the problem is. I didn't orient the camera parallel and perpendicular to the model, but they're just snapshots. Here we are, it's starting to develop. I started painting these beams. That's the first coat. That's a flat brown from Tamaya paint. There I've painted out all those, that's paper on the back of that wood. It's all painted out now. There will be a series of trusses going across here on these heavy beams. It'll be a removable roof. Here's how I solved the problem of doing this, all these trim pieces. The solution was to use styrene. So once again, I printed out another copy of my front in CAD. And I didn't want to glue it on because I couldn't get paper off the last time I glued it. So I taped it. And then I took a number 10 blade and I carefully outlined this shape and this shape. And I decided to make these trim pieces out of styrene as well. On my HO model I did about 20 years ago, which was half this size, HO, half O, I made them out of wood. And I remember how challenging that was to get these accurate in wood. And I thought, since I'm making these out of styrene, I might as well make these out of styrene, paint everything brown, and nobody will know it's the wiser. I did debate on using 1/16 inch plywood, but I like the idea of using styrene because it would be smoother, and plywood would be very difficult to work with. Even cutting this out, we get edge chipping, and styrene was the way to go. And there's the first piece in. Now, because this wall was made with a template from CAD, and then this was made off the same template, everything fit perfectly, which wasn't the case with the HO model I did 20 years ago. I remember hand fitting and hand sanding and filling, and just what a deal that was. But this just fit like magic. There's the post in place. It looks like that's in place. Looks like I do a little filling there. And there I put in the first pieces of trim. These are 1x6s. This is put in place. I did go back with a fingernail file, a sanding board, if you will, and I knocked this edge off and I knocked some of this crap that's here and gave this another couple coats of paint. But this is as it is. There we are. She's really shaping up. So there's all those pieces. These are the rings. There'll be some trim around this. And all of this will get weathered, of course. The whole thing will get weathered. But this is in place. I got a gap there I got to deal with. It's coming along. There's the side. This is still not finished to my liking. And again, this will take a whole new dynamic with weathering and some detail items, but it's shaping up nicely. There's some, give you an idea of how it really is shaping up. I mean, if that doesn't look old fashioned, which was my goal, you know, this green and white and this almost European look to it here, this brown and white. Again, we're early in the process and I got to keep doing what I call bouncing, sanding, painting, filling, getting it to, you know, getting it perfect, getting the colors all enough paint on there that's still transparent, you know, but the left photograph gives you an idea of the direction this model is going. It's looking really sharp. And we talked, Burr Stewart talked about selective compression from a modeling perspective, and Jim echoed it. Remember, this is not full-size O scale. That would be, this is roughly 11.5 inches in length, you know, modeled as designed by Mr. John Allen himself. This would have been 16.5 inches. So this is selective compression, not of a prototype, but of a master modeler, our first master modeler, John Allen. There's another look inside. You see my wainscoting. This has the proper amount of green on it now. It'll all get weathered, of course. Shaping up.
Absolutely outstanding, Tom. Just beautiful.
Yeah. So here's the difference. Here, this wall is basically done. Besides the weathering, a little tiny bit there. And this one's still in process. See the green transparent here. I call it a bounce, where you put on the green, you slop it onto the white, you put on the white, get it on the green, you go back and forth till you get it to look like this. And every time I put on white, I'll go back and I'll touch that up. You know, before you know it, it's as good as it can be. And then once you have it as good as you can be, you sand it, file it, scratch it, and weather it. So, but you got to get it as perfect as you can up front, and then it reflects well when you start weathering it. And next week, I will finish this back wall, finish the roof, hopefully weather it. It won't be super detailed yet. It won't have anything inside like workbenches and garbage cans and brooms and all this, but it should be a, quote, finished model next week.
Absolutely outstanding. You're really outdoing yourself.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Tom?
Yeah, Tom.
Great
job. Great job.
Thank you.
Forgot to do the green on the bottom of the right-hand window.
We're not done yet.
Okay. That's good. Good comeback.
Yeah, I think I spent half my week going back and forth with that green. In fact, I dream in green and white now.
Okay.
So.
That's beautiful modeling. Thanks so much, Tom. See you next week.
Yep, thank you.
Well, folks, that's it for this evening's show. It's time for our caboose. So, Pat, if you please.
This is Oscar.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. And by the way, anybody who have model railroad that they'd like to share with us, we can always use your short video as our caboose. So we'd love to hear from you. But thanks so much for being here tonight. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something.